إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. قال الله تعالى في القرآن المجيد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم قال إنك لن تستطيع معي صبرا وكيف تصبر على ما لم تحط به خبرا. وقال عليه الصلاة والسلام عجبا لأمر المؤمن إن أمره كله له خير وليس ذلك لأحد إلا للمؤمن إن أصابته سراء شكر فكانت خيرا له وإن أصابته ضراء صبر فكانت خيرا له. Dear respected brothers and sisters, we begin by praising Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We send peace and blessings upon the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, upon his companions, and upon all those who have treaded in their footsteps of righteousness and piety. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He makes us from those who follow in their teachings, in their footsteps and their practices. Ameen. Ya Rabbil Alameen. In today's khutbah, what I like to share is the incident which took place between Musa alayhi salam and Khidr alayhi salatu wasalam. Every Fajr of Jum'ah, so every Friday, we as Muslims are encouraged to recite Surah Al-Kahf. In Surah Al-Kahf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala narrates to us a number of stories. He mentions to us the story of Musa alayhi salam. He mentions to us the story of Dhul Qarnayn. And in between all that, there's a number of different lessons Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to learn from Surah Al-Kahf. And the Prophet ﷺ, he mentions that whosoever recites Surah Al-Kahf on the day of Jum'ah, then that person will be saved from the fitna, from the trials of the Dajjal. Now in today's khutbah, we don't have time to necessarily go into who Dajjal is, what sort of trials and fitnas he's going to be coming with, the way he's going to be challenging and testing us as human beings and Muslims. We'll save that for a different time. But what we do have time for is understanding in brevity that Dajjal, when he comes, he will be up to no good, and his objective in life is to detract human beings away from the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's his main task, right? That's his main task. And just to throw it out there, Dajjal is not some sort of creature, and as sometimes people tend to believe, Dajjal is the TV. No, the TV is bad, but Dajjal is not bad. Dajjal is not the TV, right? Some people like to have some metaphorical answer to it. Oh, your cell phone is the Dajjal because it has a camera in the front. No, right? That's not what it is. If you read the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you'll understand that Dajjal is a human being, and a human being like you and I, right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him special powers. That's it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him the ability to do certain things, but he's a human being at the end of the day, right? He's not some sort of object. He's not some sort of ideology, right? Whatever the case. He's a human being, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him different powers. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him a mission as well. And his mission is to detract human beings from the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to convince human beings that Dajjal himself is the true God, the true creator. Right? Just like how Fir'aun, he was able to convince the entire nation of Egypt at that time that he was the supreme being. He was the creator. He was a human being at the end of the day. Right? So that's what Dajjal is going to do. And the Prophet ﷺ, he mentions that whosoever recites Surah Al-Kahf on the day of Jum'ah, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will save him from the trials of the Dajjal, the fitness of Dajjal. Now there is, again, we don't have time to get into all those different fitnas, all those different trials. But when reading Surah Al-Kahf, we begin to understand the relationship between why Rasulullah ﷺ has encouraged us to read this surah out of all the other surahs. There's 114 surahs in the Quran. Why did Rasulullah ﷺ pinpoint this surah in specific? Right, aside from the fact that this surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has picked it and there's some sort of special meaning behind it. But also, the scholars have mentioned when you read and you understand the message that is being given through Surah Al-Kahf, you begin to realize why this is such an important surah to keep in mind during times of the Dajjal, right? During times of Dajjal, it will be very confusing for people. And Surah Al-Kahf really puts things into perspective. And in the society, in the era that we live in today, it seems to us that we live in a very confused time. That we don't really know what's going on. For us as Muslims, we're not sure where we stand. Are we safe? Are we in trouble? Is everything going to be okay for us and our families? Right? This is how it will be during the time of Dajjal, but to a greater extent. To the extent where people, to save their lives, to save the lives of their families, they will begin to worship the Dajjal. Right? They will begin to accept the Dajjal as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us. And in Surah Al-Kahf, Allah brings the story of Musa alayhi salam and Khidr. Khidr alayhi salam was also a human being. Right? There's many different things that have been said about Khidr alayhi salam. Probably the most significant is, was Khidr alayhi salam a prophet or not? Khidr alayhi salam, majority of the scholars mention he was not a prophet. Rather, he was a very, very sincere worshipper of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was a very great wali. He was a very close friend of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the extent where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him knowledge of the unseen. Right? Musa alayhi salam, and this entire incident of why Musa alayhi salam has to meet Khidr alayhi salam, it mentions in the hadith, it mentions that once a group of Musa alayhi salam's followers, right, they asked, the Banu Israel asked Musa alayhi salam that, who is the most learned person? So Musa alayhi salam, being a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, being a person who is also known as Kalimullah, the one who speaks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said, not out of arrogance, he mentioned, I'm the most knowledgeable. I speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I have contact with Jibreel alayhi salam. I'm a prophet, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made me a Rasul. And therefore, it's just, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me the most knowledge. He said, I'm the most knowledgeable. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not like this coming from Musa alayhi salam, right? For Musa alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala holds different people to different degrees, to different standards. You see, when you read the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you see that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam made istighfar. He sought forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala 100 times a day. And the scholars ask, why did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness so much? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is ma'asum. He does not do anything incorrect. He doesn't do any sin. He doesn't disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then why is it that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is seeking forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala 100 times a day and more? So the scholars, they mention, the reason being is the prophets have a different relationship, a different standard with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For them, it's not a matter of, the question isn't even about, am I going to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or not? For them, for the prophets, it's a matter of, why am I not doing more? If the Prophet ﷺ is spending 1/3 of his night praying tahajjud, his concern is, why am I not praying more? And because I'm not praying more, because I'm not pushing myself more, therefore I'm seeking forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So with Musa alayhi salam, there was a different standard. It's completely true that Musa alayhi salam was the most knowledgeable. But what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to hear from Musa alayhi salam was, Allah is the most knowledgeable. So therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded Musa alayhi salam that, in order to teach you a lesson, I want you to go and meet this slave of ours, this person, right, the servant, his name is Khidr, right, and we'll tell you how to find him. So Musa alayhi salam meets Khidr alayhi salam, and he tells Khidr alayhi salam that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded me to meet you and to learn from you. So the first thing Khidr alayhi salam says, إِنَّكَ لَن تَسْتَطِيعَ مَعِيَ صَبْرًا. That, I don't think you'll be able to stay with me. I don't think you can be my companion in this journey. I don't think you have the patience. Right? What Khidr alayhi salam is saying, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me a different type of knowledge. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Musa alayhi salam a certain type of knowledge, And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Khidr alayhi salam a different type of knowledge. The knowledge which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed Khidr alayhi salam with was known as ilm al-ghuyub, the knowledge of the unseen, right? Knowledge of the unseen, the reality of why things happen, right? That we see something in front of us and immediately we look at it and it looks horrible. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that from this one horrible thing, it will lead to so many other things, and then eventually something good will come out of it. And that is ilm al-ghuyub. That is the knowledge of the unseen. And that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Khidr alayhi salam. So Khidr alayhi salam is telling Musa that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you the knowledge of nubuwah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you the knowledge of prophethood. The knowledge of prophethood is knowing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us now, how we're supposed to do it, how we're supposed to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Khidr alayhi salam is saying, Allah gave you that knowledge, but Allah gave me a different type of knowledge. Allah gave me the knowledge of the unseen. So I know the reality of what happens behind the scenes. Sometimes we say, what's happening behind the scenes, right? Meaning you see an event that took place, right? You go to an event and you're like, wow, this event went so well and whatnot. And then the people who set that event up, the organizers, they'll say something like, oh, you have no idea what took place behind the scenes, right? We put so much hard work into it, we put so much effort behind it, so on and so forth, to make it work out. So Khidr alayhi salam had the knowledge of the unseen. He knew what was going on behind the scenes, behind what is apparent to all of us. So he's telling Musa alayhi salam, you can't, I don't think you'll be able to accompany me in my journey because you don't have the knowledge of the unseen. For you, what you see in front of you is all you understand. You don't know what this will lead to. You don't know the circumstances behind why such things happen, why this is meant to happen, why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted this to happen, the hikmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? For many of us as Muslims, actually as human beings, we are unable to completely understand the hikmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That when something happens, we don't know. Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala want this to happen? What's the purpose behind it? What's the wisdom behind it? To a certain extent we can guess, we can assume, but there's no certainty. But Khidr alayhi salam had that knowledge. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him the knowledge whereby he understood the reason, the wisdom behind each and every single thing that took place and why it took place. So he studied Musa alayhi salam, I don't think he'll be able to accompany me. Why? Because you don't know what's happening behind the scenes. You don't really have this sort of knowledge which Allah gave me. And if you see what I'm doing, you're going to get angry. So Musa alayhi salam says, وَكَيْفَ تَصْبِرُ and then Khidr alayhi salam gives him the reason. He says, وَكَيْفَ تَصْبِرُ عَلَى مَا لَمْ تُحِطْ بِهِ خُبْرًا. He said, how is it possible for you to be patient regarding something which you're unaware of, right? I'll give you an example. You go to the DMV, right? And you're waiting in line for 3 hours. And you're like, what's taking them so long, right? And you're getting angry, right? And then finally you get to the line and then you yell at the person, why did it take me 3 hours to get here, blah, blah, blah. And then the person says, calm down, we'll explain to you. And they tell you that, the computer was broken or something was going on. They explain to you the reason why you had to wait. And then after you understand the reason, you're like, okay, I understand why now. It's reasonable. It's understandable why I had to wait so long. But until you don't know, you're agitated, you're frustrated, you're angry. Why do I have to wait? Why can't these people hurry up? But once you find out, then everything makes sense. Okay, I understand now. So this is what Khidr alayhi salam is saying. That you don't have this knowledge, so when you see what I'm going to do, you're going to get angry. You're going to be upset. Then why am I doing these kind of things? Because you don't know the reality of it. So Musa alayhi salam says, Musa alayhi salam in response, he says, that's not the case, inshallah. I will be patient, satajuni inshallah min as-sabirin, that you will find me from those people who are patient, right? Musa alayhi salam, he says that, don't worry, I'll follow you and I'll listen to whatever you have to, whatever you do, and inshallah, I won't say anything, right? So they begin their journey, right? What's the exact ayah? He says over here, سَتَجِدُونِ إِنْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ صَابِرًا وَلَا أَعْصِي لَكَ أَمْرًا. Right? So he mentions Musa alayhi salam, he says that, inshallah you'll find me to be patient and understanding, and I promise I won't do anything you tell me not to. Right? You're telling me not to. So Khidr alayhi salam basically tells Musa alayhi salam that if you want to accompany me in my journey, then you have to promise that you will not ask me any questions. Right? That's the promise. If you want to be with me in this journey, you have to promise that you will not ask me any questions. Whatever I do, you just remain quiet, observe, and then when the time comes, I will explain to you why I'm doing these kind of things and why these things happen. So Musa alayhi salam says, no problem, I'll do that, and I promise I won't break this instruction of yours. I'll follow you. فَلَا تَسْأَلْنِي عَنْ شَيْءٍ. Don't ask me anything حَتَّى أُحْدِثَ لَكَ مِنْهُ ذِكْرًا, until I mention it to you, until I explain it to you. So Musa alayhi salam agrees. So they go on to their journey, and three things happen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions three incidents which took place. The first is where Musa alayhi salam and Khidr alayhi salatu wasalam, they're traveling and they need to get past a river. And a boat comes, and the boat is owned by someone who knows Khidr. And this person says, hey, why don't you jump on my boat? I'll take you and I won't charge you a fee. Right? I'm not going to... I won't charge you anything, right? So Khidr alayhi salam, Musa alayhi salam, they get on this boat, and now they're traveling. Once they reach their destination, the other side of the river, what Khidr alayhi salam does, he grabs an axe and he damages the boat, right? The deck of the boat, he breaks off a piece of wood from it so that the boat starts, so that there's a leak, right? The boat is now damaged. So Musa alayhi salam, he gets all worked up. He says, what are you doing? These people, out of their generosity and kindness, just gave us a free lift. They just gave us a free ride. And instead of thanking them, you damaged their boat. Right? Instead of thanking them, you do something worse to them. What are you doing? So then Khidr alayhi salam, he says, I told you, you won't be able to be patient. So Musa alayhi salam says, okay, I'm sorry. It was a mistake, I forgot, let's move on. So they move on, and then the next incident, the second incident, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, is Khidr alayhi salam comes across a young boy, and he kills this boy, right? A youngster. Imagine you're walking with someone and the guy just kills a kid, right? You're going to be distressed. You're going to be disturbed. So Musa alayhi salam says, what are you doing? You just killed an innocent life. You just killed an innocent young kid who didn't do anything to you. You were just playing around. And then Khidr alayhi salam again rebukes him. Says, what are you doing? I told you, if you want to accompany me in this trip, you have to just stay shut. So Musa alayhi salam says, okay, give me one more chance. So then, the third time, what happens is, Musa alayhi salam and Khidr, they go into this village, and they're asking for food, right? They go into this village, and they tell the people of the village that, hey, we're travelers, can you give us some food? So the people of the village say, no, we're not going to give you food, we don't know you guys, whatever the case, right? So what Khidr alayhi salam does is, he finds a wall, and he fixes the wall. The wall was falling down, right? The wall was like breaking apart, it was about to tip over. So Khidr alayhi salam, he fixes the wall. He reconstructs it. And Musa alayhi salam is, again, he's surprised. He's saying, why are you helping these people when they refuse to help us? So then finally Khidr alayhi salam says, that's it. We have to separate now. This is your third and last chance. You're out now, right? You asked me 3 times already why I'm doing what I'm doing, whereas you promised me you wouldn't ask me. So now Khidr alayhi salam says, but before we leave, let me explain to you why those things happened. So Khidr alayhi salam goes on to explain. He says, the reason why I damaged that boat, that ship, because moving on a little further away, there's a king in the nearby town. And this king is looking for ships that are in good condition so he can take them for himself. So I damaged this person's ship so that they wouldn't lose their ship, right? So what apparently seemed very bad turned out to be something good. The second incident, Khidr alayhi salam says that, this boy that I killed, the reason I killed this boy is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informed me that this boy would be the cause of his parents turning away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore, he had to be removed. And then the third incident, which was about the wall, he explains to him that the reason why I fixed up that wall is because under the wall there is a treasure, right? That treasure belongs to 2 orphans in that town. And if this wall had to tip over and fall, then this treasure would be exposed and all the people would take the wealth of these orphans. So I reconstructed that wall so that when the orphans grow up, they know where it is and they can take it out on their own, right? It won't be exposed. So the point that Khidr alayhi salam is saying, he first mentions وَمَا فَعَلْتُهُ عَنْ أَمْرِي, that understand all these things that I did not do them because I felt like doing them. I didn't do them because I just, wanted to do it. I did them because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded me. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me that a knowledge of the unseen. He gave me the knowledge of what's happening behind the scenes. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded me to do these kind of things. Right? So he makes it very clear. وَمَا فَعَلْتُهُ عَنْ أَمْرِي, that I didn't do these because I felt like doing it. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who commanded me. He said, ذَلِكَ تَأْوِيلُ مَا لَمْ تَسْطِعْ عَلَيْهِ الصَّبْرَ. He says this is the interpretation, or this is the meaning, the explanation of what you were not able to remain patient about. Meaning all these things you were, saying, why are you doing this? You weren't able to remain patient. This is the reason behind it. This is the reasoning, this is the explanation behind it. Right? Okay, inshallah everyone move up. Jazakallah khair. But what this all goes back to is a lesson for all of us as Muslims. Right? The lesson that we can learn from this is that there are things that are happening beyond our understanding. There are things and dynamics that are taking place beyond our vision of sight, our vision of understanding. There are things that are happening. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control. And the lesson that I want everyone to focus on today and take with them from this story of Musa alayhi salam and Khidr is that no matter how bleak or difficult or strange things begin to look, we as Muslims have to always rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, have to continue having faith and believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control and that there is something good that will come out of all this. Right? And the reason why we have to hear this, why it's so important for us to hear this message in particular today, is because Muslims living in this country, not only Muslims, but majority of Americans living in this country are very, very scared of what's going to happen in the next couple of years. We're uncertain. For many Muslims, it's traumatizing. What will happen to us? What will happen to our families? Right? Many of us are scared. Many of us are very concerned. Many of us are afraid. And when we look at the situation today, we're saying, oh man, it's the worst thing ever, right? It can't get any worse than this. But as Muslims, we have to continue returning to the Quran. We have to continue returning to the teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we have to understand that it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who is in control. And no matter how strange or no matter how bleak or bad things look today, there is the hikmah, the reasoning, the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that's behind all these actions. And that is one of the greatest lessons from Surah Al-Kahf. That is the biggest lesson we can learn from the incident of Musa alayhi salam and Khidr. That these bad things were happening. An innocent child is killed, right? Property is damaged. People who don't deserve help are being helped. People who don't deserve anything are the ones in control. The worst types of people are in control. Right? And Khidr alayhi salam is saying that there's a reason behind it. And Khidr alayhi salam explains to Musa alayhi salam what the reason is. He says, if this is the reason. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is well aware of what's happening. He knows, so don't be worried. And this is the lesson we have to hear. This is the meaning, the message we have to hear as well as Muslims. That Allah is in control. Not to say don't worry about it, let all these things happen. Right? We have to try our best. But there are things that are beyond our control. There are things that we have no control over, that we can't do anything about and just watch. And this is where this message of the Quran comes into play. That we have to simply accept that there's reason and wisdom behind why all these things are happening. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in full control. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is allowing these things to happen. And eventually there is something good that will come out of it. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to learn this message. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to understand and internalize this message and accept what it is for what it is. And one thing I'll mention before I finish is that, Khidr alayhi salam gives a very valid point. He says, how can you be patient regarding something you don't know, right? It doesn't make sense to you. But that's the key over there. We simply have to remain patient. Like Musa alayhi salam, we have to remain patient, right? Just remain patient, and inshallah a time will come when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals all these things to us, where we see, 10 years ago this bad thing happened, and if that bad thing didn't happen 10 years ago, then this good thing wouldn't have happened today. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to understand. Ameen. Barakallahu lana wa lakum fil Qur'an al-Majid wa nafa'na wa iyyakum bil ayati wa dhikr al-hakim. Astaghfirullah li wa lakum wa li sa'iril muslimin fastaghfiru innahu huwal ghafurur rahim. الحمد لله الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله وكفى بالله شهيدا ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله قال الله تعالى في القرآن المجيد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد عبدك ورسولك وصل على المؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات وبارك على محمد وأزواجه وذريته قال النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام أرحم أمتي بأمتي أبو بكر وأشدهم في أمر الله تعالى عمر وأصدقهم حياء عثمان وأقضاهم علي وفاطمة سيدة نساء أهل الجنة والحسن والحسين سيدا شباب أهل الجنة وحمزة أسد الله وأسد رسوله رضوان الله تعالى عليهم أجمعين. Before we conclude, I'd like to share with everyone a beautiful hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Rasulullah ﷺ, he mentions عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ, that the condition, the affair of a believer is indeed wonderful. He says, إِنَّ أَمْرَهُ كُلَّهُ لَهُ خَيْرٌ, that every scenario, every circumstance for a believer turns out to be good, right? So he says a Muslim is a person who, no matter what the circumstances are, whether it looks bad or looks good, it turns out to be good for them. He says, وَلَيْسَ ذَلِكَ لِأَحَدٍ إِلَّا لِلْمُؤْمِنِ, and this is the situation only with a Muslim, right? Not just a Muslim by name, but when a person is really a believer, when a person really believes this, the only time that a person will always be happy, or the only time when things will always turn out to be good for them, is when a person really understands what's about to be said. The Prophet, he says, in asabatu sarra shakara, that if the believer experiences something good, then he is thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He expresses his gratitude. فَكَانَتْ خَيْرًا لَهُ, and that becomes something good for him. And in the situation when asabatu dharra, and if something unfortunate, a calamity, had to strike the believer, right? So the Prophet is not saying that no matter what happens, you should always be happy, or there's no such thing as a bad day, right? The Prophet is saying that bad things will happen, but it's the way you understand and perceive that bad thing. The Prophet says, when a bad thing happens, when a disaster strikes, sabara, the person remains patient. فَكَانَتْ خَيْرًا لَهُ, and the person is able to understand and learn from that disaster, from that bad thing, and it becomes something good for him. Right? فَكَانَ خَيْرًا لَهُ. It becomes good for him. And this is only a believer. That only a believer can be like this during both good and bad times, where they take advantage of it. They either are patient or they are thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and at the end the result is always the same. It turns out to be something good for them. So again, this is just a reminder for all of us today, in a situation, in a world where many of us are scared and concerned about what's to happen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to be those who, when misfortune and calamity strikes, we are patient and it turns out to be good for us. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it such that when we are experiencing the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we are thankful to Him for these blessings. Ameen. Jazakallah khair. بارك الله لنا ولكم في القرآن المجيد ونفعنا وإياكم بالآيات وذكر الحكيم إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون فاذكروا الله يذكركم واشكروه ولا تكفرون أقيموا الصلاة